Some stories don't need special effects. They don't need dramatic music or jump scares carefully engineered in an editing suite. The scariest stories are the ones that happen in the most ordinary places. In your kid's bedroom on a Saturday night, in the woods behind your best friend's house, in the quiet hallway of your own home, at 2 in the morning when you're supposed to be safe. The accounts you're about to read are real. They were shared by real people. And the thing that makes them impossible to shake, the thing that will stay with you long after you finish, is how normal everything seemed right before everything went wrong. Read these in the daylight if you can. You'll understand why in a moment. The Pirate at the Window, the Sleepover. It was a Friday night in late October of 2018. My son Caleb had just turned 8 years old the week before, and as a birthday gift, my wife and I had promised him he could have 4 of his closest friends sleep over at our house that weekend. My wife, Lisa, had been planning it for a couple of weeks. The sleeping bags were laid out, the pizza was ordered, and a stack of movies sat by the TV that I was almost certain no one was going to watch. What I didn't account for was Lisa getting an emergency call from her sister that afternoon. Her sister had just been in a minor car accident about 40 minutes away. Nobody was seriously hurt, but Lisa felt like she had to be there. She kissed me on the cheek, told me to keep an eye on the boys without hovering, and walked out the door with her overnight bag before the first kid had even arrived. So there I was, a 42-year-old man about to supervise 5 8-year-old boys on his own. I want to be upfront about something. When Lisa told me to keep an eye on them without making it obvious, I thought that was a little dramatic. I figured I'd just camp out on the couch, check on them every hour or so, and everybody would be fine. But if you're married, or if you've ever lived with someone who is significantly smarter than you, then you already know that ignoring that kind of instruction is never a good idea. So I followed Lisa's rule. I kept my distance, but I paid attention. The boys were all in Caleb's room down the hall. I could hear them from the living room, the kind of wild, chaotic noise that only a group of little boys can produce. Shouting, laughing, something getting knocked over, then more laughing. I flipped on the TV and let them have their fun. Every 30 minutes or so, I'd wander over to the hallway, stand near Caleb's door, and just listen. The first couple of check-ins were unremarkable. They were building with building blocks, arguing about the rules to some game they'd invented, taking turns trying to gross each other out. Normal kid stuff. I'd smile to myself and walk back to the couch. But around 9:30, I heard something different. It was a tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, like someone knocking on glass. I muted the television and sat very still. Tap, 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 coming from the direction of Caleb's room. I told myself it was probably one of the boys messing around, tapping on the window from the inside just to make the others laugh. Kids do weird things. I decided to let it go. What I could not let go of, what made the hair on my arms stand straight up, was what came next. Silence. Complete, total silence from a room that had been generating noise all evening, like it was its sole purpose in the universe. 5 boys. Not a single sound. I set down my drink and walked to the hallway. 4 boys. I pressed my ear against the door. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, whispering. Quiet, excited, conspiratorial whispering. The kind kids do when they're either planning something mischievous or reacting to something that just happened. I knocked twice and opened the door. 4 boys looked up at me from the floor. They were sitting cross-legged on the rug in a loose circle, surrounded by scattered toys and building blocks. A couple of them had that look, you know the one, where they're clearly trying very hard not to look guilty about something. And then I noticed the window. It was open, not cracked. Fully open, the screen pushed up, cold October air drifting into the room. I told them to keep the window shut. It was getting chilly outside, and reminded them to keep the volume at a reasonable level. Normal dad stuff. I was about to close the door and head to the bathroom before going back to the couch when something caught up with me. Something I hadn't processed in the moment. I walked back to the door and opened it again. "Hey," I said, "where's Marcus?" Marcus was Caleb's best friend since kindergarten. A small, cheerful kid with a gap between his front teeth who laughed at everything. There were supposed to be 5 boys in that room. There were 4. The remaining 4 boys all looked at each other in that slow, uncertain way that children do when they know they've done something wrong but aren't sure exactly how wrong it is. Then Caleb pointed at the open window. "He went with the pirate," he said, "to find the treasure. The man in the car." I'm not going to try to describe what I felt in that moment because I don't think language is fully equipped to handle it. There was fear, obviously. There was the cold, electric shock of panic. But underneath all of that was something quieter and more nauseating. The slow, dawning understanding that something genuinely terrible might be happening, and that I was the only adult in the house, and that the window was open, and that Marcus was gone. I was too big to fit through that window. I knew that immediately. I ran. Down the hallway, through the kitchen, out the front door. The cold air hit me like a wall as I sprinted across the front yard, scanning the street in both directions. I saw them about 100 feet away. A man, adult, medium build, wearing a dark jacket, was walking along the sidewalk toward a car parked at the curb. He was holding Marcus's hand. Marcus was trotting along beside him like they were old friends, the way trusting little kids do. I screamed. I screamed his name, and I screamed at the man, and they both turned around. For a fraction of a second, just a fraction, the man and I made eye contact across the darkness of that street. Then he let go of Marcus's hand. He got in the car, a light-colored sedan, older model, nothing remarkable, and he drove away fast. Not quite fast enough to screech the tires, but fast. The kind of fast that tells you the person behind the wheel is trying to be calm, but is not calm. I ran to Marcus and grabbed him and brought him inside. Aftermath, I was shaking when I called the other parents. Marcus was fine, physically unhurt, completely unaware of how close he had come to something I still can't bring myself to fully name. He was just a little confused about why the pirate had left without him finding the treasure. I told all 4 parents what happened and asked them to come pick up their kids. Some of them were there in under 10 minutes. Marcus's dad arrived last. He was upset, and I understood why. I'd have been furious too. But after the initial shock wore off, they thanked me. And as far as I know, Marcus grew up fine. He and Caleb stayed friends all the way through middle school. The police came that night. I gave them what description I could of the man in the car, which wasn't much. They drove around the neighborhood, found nothing, took a report. According to the boys, the man had approached Caleb's window earlier in the evening and knocked on it. When one of them opened it to see what was happening, the man spoke in a theatrical pirate voice and told them that there was treasure buried nearby and that he needed one brave helper to come find it with him. Marcus had volunteered. He climbed out the window on his own, completely willingly, because to him it was an adventure. The man had not touched him, had not threatened him, had just walked up to a ground-floor bedroom window on a residential street in a quiet neighborhood and used a voice and a story to lure a child outside. That's the part I still think about. Not the running, not the car driving away. The voice, the story, the fact that it worked. The fact that if I'd been watching TV a little more intently, if I hadn't followed my wife's instructions, I might never have heard the silence. The man in the truck into the woods. I was 15 the summer this happened. It was the last week of our freshman year, and me and my two best friends, Jade and Brooklyn, were the kind of restless that only teenagers in a small town on a warm evening can really be. We needed something to do. We needed somewhere to go. Brooklyn's house backed up against a stretch of woods that ran for maybe half a mile before hitting the far side of a commercial property. We'd been in those woods before, explored them a dozen times over the years, and they felt safe to us in the way that familiar places always feel safe, which is to say they felt safe right up until they didn't. We grabbed our stuff, told Brooklyn's older brother we were going for a walk, and headed into the trees. It was a good evening at first. The light was doing that thing where it comes in long and golden through the branches, and everything felt a little like a movie. We were laughing, talking about summer plans, moving deeper into the woods than we usually went. After about 20 minutes, we found a small clearing near a creek and stopped there for a while. We were having fun. I want to make that clear, because the rest of this story is not fun. And I want you to understand that the evening started with 3 teenage girls feeling completely at ease in a place they'd been 100 times before. We started heading back toward the path that led to the exit around dusk. That's when we saw the truck that followed. It was parked at the edge of the woods near the access road that ran along the boundary of the trees. An older pickup truck, faded grayish-blue, engine idling. We could see it from the path. We didn't think much of it at first. People park trucks near the woods all the time, usually hunters or people walking dogs. We kept walking. The engine revved. We looked at each other. The truck began to move, slowly following the access road in the same direction we were walking. "It's probably nothing," Brooklyn said. We kept walking. The truck kept pace. We stopped. The truck stopped. We looked at each other again, and this time nobody said it was probably nothing, because we all knew it wasn't. We ran. We cut off the main path and scrambled up a small rise, crouching behind a dense patch of brush where the truck's headlights couldn't reach us. We stayed there, breathing hard, listening. After a minute or two, we heard the truck roll past. The headlights swept across the trees above us. When the sound of the engine faded, we exhaled. "Okay," Jade whispered. "Let's go. Now. Fast." We stood up, brushed ourselves off, and started moving toward the main exit of the woods with a lot more urgency than we'd entered with. The whole thing had probably been nothing. A local driving slowly, minding his own business. We were teenagers and we'd spooked ourselves. We'd laugh about it later. We were maybe 5 minutes from the exit when we stopped laughing entirely. Headlights at the exit. The headlights were there before we were. The truck had circled around. It was parked across the main exit of the woods, angled diagonally, completely blocking the path out. The engine was still running. The headlights aimed directly into the tree line. We stood at the edge of the light and stared at it. I couldn't make out many details, just the silhouette of the cab, the low rumble of the engine, and the shape of someone sitting behind the wheel. Large, still, waiting. Brooklyn grabbed my arm. Jade had gone completely quiet beside me. "We're not going through there," I said. Nobody argued. Jade pulled a small pocket knife from her jacket. It wasn't much, a folding knife with a blade about 3 inches long that she'd carried since her dad gave it to her 2 years ago. But holding it seemed to steady her. I took it from her anyway. Not because I doubted her, but because I needed something in my hands. We turned around and went back into the woods. we found a different way out, a gap in the fence on the far eastern edge of the property that we discovered years ago on one of our earlier explorations. It came out on a different street, about a quarter-mile from Brooklyn's house. We ran the whole way. We didn't call anyone that night. We told ourselves it was nothing, a creep, a local oddball, someone whose behavior was threatening but not necessarily dangerous. We told ourselves a lot of things. What we found in September, we stayed out of those woods for the rest of the summer. We didn't talk about the truck much. We moved into sophomore year and let the memory drift to the background, the way you do with things that scared you, but didn't actually hurt you. Then came September 10th, Brooklyn's 16th birthday. There were 8 of us that night, 6 girls and 2 boys from our friend group. Brooklyn wanted to celebrate in the woods. We figured there was safety in numbers, and we figured enough time had passed. We went back in. The first part of the evening was fine. We found the creek, messed around, took some pictures. It was starting to feel like reclaiming something. Like we were proving to ourselves that we'd overreacted back in June. Then someone found a path none of us had noticed before. It branched off from the main trail near the eastern edge of the woods. To reach it, you had to go down a short, steep embankment, maybe 8 feet of loose dirt and roots. We all climbed down. The path curved around some dense brush and then opened up slightly, and at the end of the left fork, we found a clearing. There was a structure there, half-built, like someone had started constructing something and then abandoned it. Raw lumber, no roof, a wooden ladder leaning against one wall, a stone fire pit with old ash in it, and hanging between the trees, suspended from branches by lengths of paracord, were 3 handsaws. Just hanging there, swaying slightly in the breeze. We took pictures. We were tired and a little disoriented and probably not processing things as sharply as we should have been. The handsaws were strange, but we talked ourselves into explanations. Somebody's storage setup, an old work site, nothing to worry about. We went down the right fork. I wish we hadn't. The structure. About 100 yards down the right fork, in a small depression between 2 large oaks, we found it. A hangman's frame. Rough-cut lumber lashed together with rope, standing about 8 feet tall. It was old. The wood had gone gray and the rope was frayed. But it was standing. It hadn't fallen. Someone had built it to last. Below the frame, a noose lay coiled on the ground, not hanging, just sitting there, as if it had been lowered and left. Beside the noose, pushed against one of the tree roots, was a single old boot. Worn down to almost nothing, the leather cracked and dark. And next to the boot, partly buried in leaves, was a shovel. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then one of the boys said very quietly, "We need to leave." We left. We took pictures of everything before we went. I don't know exactly why, except that it felt important to document it, like we needed proof that it was real. And we filed a report with the county sheriff's office the following week, and an officer went out to look at it. He found the structure and confirmed it was there. He said there was no evidence of recent activity and couldn't determine who had built it. We never went back. But here's what I think about sometimes, on nights when I can't sleep. The truck. The man who circled the woods and blocked the exit and waited. The fact that we ran and found another way out, and he didn't catch us. And what was waiting in those woods for whoever he did catch. The head at the top of the stairs. The kind of mom you can't fight. I'm 31 years old and I live alone in a small rental house in a rural county in Tennessee. My parents live about 3 blocks away, which has both advantages and disadvantages, depending on the week. My mom is, and I say this with complete love, a lot. She's always been the anxious type, the kind of woman who calls twice if you don't pick up the first time, who leaves a porch light on whether you're coming over or not. When I moved into my rental house 2 years ago, she insisted on having a key, just in case. I want to be very clear that I knew at the moment I handed her that key that I was going to regret it. But she's my mom, and if you've ever had a parent who loves you the way mine loves me, with that particular brand of unconditional, slightly suffocating devotion, then you know that saying no isn't always as simple as it sounds. She also has early-stage memory problems. Nothing severe, but enough that my dad has started gently managing her schedule, reminding her of things she's forgotten, keeping an eye on her in the way that you keep an eye on a child. Not because she's helpless, but because you love her and the world is full of edges. All of this is important context for what happened on a Saturday night in March of last year. The unlocked door, I'd been out with a group of old college friends who'd come through town for the weekend. We'd ended up at a bar on the edge of downtown, really the only place in our town worth ending up. And I'd had more than a few drinks by the time I said my goodbyes and started the 4-block walk home just after 2 in the morning. It was a cold night. Clear sky, no wind, the kind of rural quiet where you can hear yourself breathe. I walked with my hands in my jacket pockets and my head down, not thinking about anything in particular. I climbed the 3 steps to my front porch, reached into my pocket for my keys. My hand wrapped around the doorknob before I found them. It turned. The door was already unlocked. I stood there for a second, the cold air pressing against my back, and felt something shift in my chest. Not quite alarm, not yet. Just a kind of alertness, a recalibration. My mom had been here. I pushed open the door, stepped inside, locked it behind me. The living room was dark. The kitchen light was on, the way I always leave it when I'm out at night. On the kitchen counter, beside a bakery box I didn't recognize, was a note in her handwriting. "You left this at the house last week. Figured you'd want it. Made you a little something, too." I opened the bakery box. Inside was half a coffee cake, covered in plastic wrap. I called out her name. No answer. I checked the downstairs. Living room, kitchen, bathroom. All empty, all undisturbed. She must have come by while I was out, left the cake and the note and gone home. The unlocked door was just her forgetting to turn the knob on her way out, which had been happening more often lately. I was about to head upstairs to bed when I heard the footsteps. The footsteps. They were coming from directly above me. The guest bedroom, maybe, or the hallway between the 2 upstairs rooms. The sound of someone walking slowly, not trying to be quiet, but not loud either, just moving around up there. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. She must have decided to wait for me upstairs. I thought she'd done it before. Let herself in, watched some TV in the guest room until she heard me come home, then padded downstairs looking relieved. My dad hated it. I hated it a little too, but in the way you hate something you secretly find comforting. I sighed. I pulled out my phone. I called my dad. 4 rings. Then his voice, rough with sleep and clearly irritated. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Yeah, sorry, Dad. I just got home. Mom's upstairs. I can hear her moving around. Can you tell her I'm back and she can head home?" A pause. Not a long pause. Maybe 2 seconds. Maybe 3. "What did you just say?" "Mom. She's upstairs in my... She's right here," my dad said. "She's asleep. She's been here since 9. The footsteps moved again above me. Slow, deliberate. Something creaking. "That's not possible," I said. "I can hear. She's asleep next to me right now." Now I'm looking at her. The words landed in a specific part of my brain and just stayed there. The footsteps moved again. The floorboards at the top of the staircase. The one board that always creaks. The one I know by sound the way you know every sound in a place you've lived in for 2 years. Groaned under weight. I looked up. The kitchen light reached maybe halfway up the staircase. The upper half was dark. At the top, just barely visible, just barely catching the edge of the light from below, was the outline of a head. Looking down at me, running I don't remember, deciding to scream. It just happened. A raw, involuntary sound that I've never made before, and hope I never make again. I heard my dad's voice through the phone saying something urgent and alarmed, but I was already moving, out the front door, down the porch steps, into the street. I ran the 4 blocks to my parents' house without stopping, speaking to my dad in broken, gasping sentences the whole way, trying to explain what I'd seen. He told me to slow down, that he was calling the police, that I needed to breathe. I didn't slow down. My mom was standing at their front door when I arrived, awake, worried, wearing her bathrobe and holding the door open with one hand and pressing her other hand against her chest in that gesture she has when she's frightened. She told me she had come over earlier that afternoon, while I was out running errands, to clean the kitchen and drop off the cake. She'd let herself in, puttered around for about an hour, and gone home before dinner. She had no memory of whether she'd locked the door behind her. The police came in 2 cruisers. One officer stayed outside with us while 2 others went through the house. Every room, every closet, the attic access panel, the crawl space under the house. They were in there for what felt like a very long time. When they came out, they said the house was clear. No signs of forced entry. No sign that anyone had been there. The door had been unlocked, likely by accident. As for what I saw at the top of the stairs, the outline of the head, looking down, they couldn't explain it. Could have been shadows. Could have been my state of mind after a night of drinking. Could have been a lot of things. I slept in my parents' guest room that night and for 2 nights after. What I know and what I don't. My dad has since started driving my mom to my place when she wants to visit, rather than letting her walk over on her own. She's not allowed to come by unannounced anymore, not because we're angry at her, but because the memory lapses have been getting harder to predict. She seems to understand, more or less, why the rules have changed. Some days that makes me sad. Some days I'm just grateful she's still herself enough to understand. The official version of that night is, she forgot to lock the door. I came home slightly drunk and scared myself. The police found nothing. I can live with that explanation. I've tried to anyway. But I keep coming back to the footsteps, the way they moved when I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, the particular sound of that one board at the top, the board I know, the board I recognize, groaning under someone's weight, and the head. I know what I saw. I know the light was dim and I'd been drinking, and fear does things to your perception that science is still catching up with. I know all of that. I also know that when I looked up that staircase and saw something looking back down at me, whatever it was did not move away. It did not duck back into the shadows. It did not react to the sound of my voice. It just watched me. For the 3 seconds it took me to run out the door, it simply watched me go. The police said the house was clear. I never asked them whether they checked under the guest bed. Why these stories matter. 3 stories, 3 ordinary situations, a kid's sleepover, a walk in the woods behind a friend's house, coming home late on a Saturday night. 3 moments where the normal world pulled back like a curtain and showed something behind it. What makes these accounts genuinely frightening, what separates them from ghost stories and movie monsters, is the specificity, the pirate voice, the truck waiting at the exit, the one board at the top of the stairs that creaks just so. Predators don't announce themselves. Danger doesn't arrive with a soundtrack. The worst things that can happen often begin as minor curiosities. A knocked window, headlights that seem to follow, a door that you were almost certain was locked. Pay attention to the small things. Trust the feeling when something is wrong. And if you're ever a parent alone with a house full of kids, if your wife's only instruction is to keep a close eye without making it obvious, listen to her. She knows things you don't.